Hey guys, what's going on? I am Ian Maures from Maures Fitness, and I am with
Gordon Briley from Pheno X Fitness and Briley Fitness and amongst some other
a
things.
thousand other things. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
awesome. So today, guys, we thought it'd be a lot of fun to actually just have a conversation about some topics in fitness that kind of get misconstrued or whatever you want to say. There's a lot of information going around, obviously, and we kind of wanted to just clear some things up. Gordy, what did you kind of
yeah.
like?
There's a lot of bullshit. I mean, so much information that it's just completely irrelevant or wrong. Or one of my I would say least favorite ones that I hear all the time is kidney damage. That protein causes kidney damage, and that's just so far from true.
Right.
Unless you have a major kidney disease, something like that. So it's just there's so many misnomers or just really bad information. So yeah, I think it's great to have a conversation,
Sure.
spit some truth, and kind of just give some people some somewhat general advice. But just remember, we're not doctors.
This is true. I'm definitely not a doctor. I'm not that smart. But Gordy kind of alluded to it. Today, we're actually just going to talk about protein. So we're going to basically like kind of run through some very hot topics on protein, like how much you need, dependent upon your age. There's a lot of different things going on. But before we get started, um, we're not doctors, but we did want to kind of like tell you about our experience, where we came from, how we got the knowledge we got, stuff like that. So I've been in the fitness industry for probably like 13 years or so. I've been all around, big companies, small companies, helped open facilities, ran facilities, and along the way did a ton of personal training. And that's what I currently do with Maures Fitness. We do in-home and virtual training along with health coaching. And I mean, I live the life. It's my hobby. It's my job. So obviously studying and learning more about it is something that I find very important. So like Gordy said,
Your
yeah,
body, your body reflects it too, man.
you
You
can
look
totally see it
good.
with my 14 hoodies on. Um, but yeah, we're not doctors, but what we really wanted to do is just like have a conversation and like really try to give you guys the best material that you guys can kind of like maybe we can break it down into layman's terms for some of you like beginners and stuff like that, and really just like hopefully you can leave here with a better understanding about maybe what you should or shouldn't have in regard to protein.
Well, show. My name is Gordon Bradley. Once again, I've been in personal training, or I've been a nutritionist for 15, 16 years now. Seems like forever. And my passion is really helping people through good information and trying to, in some ways, keep it simple. But when it comes to this, a lot of this stuff, keeping it simple, we're not that simple. We're pretty complex as humans, and are different phenotypes, so different body types essentially, and that's really important that we take that into consideration. So I love to keep it simple and teach simple information, but also slowly kind of bring in some of the complexity to it. And then I think the more information you have, the more you're going to learn overall, and the more success you have. And if you're successful, it's going to just motivate you. So practical but informative is kind of my way of going about things. But I'm obsessed with seeing people change, and when you give them that good information, and that's why I love the fact that we get a chance to do this. So
For sure.
yeah, been a trainer forever, and fitness and nutrition is my lifestyle. So yeah.
Sure. Well, also Gordy just opened up Pheno X Fitness, which is selling in-home equipment.
That's stuff.
Yeah, customize. You can customize your stuff. So if you guys are like workout warriors at your house, I mean, hey, check it out.
Yeah, good stuff.
So we're gonna roll into protein now. So we're gonna start it off by just talking about like what's the right amount to get, because I feel like a lot of the time, well, for me, and if I want to like talk about protein with my clients, the first thing I'll always have them do is keep a food journal for a few days to kind of see what their habits are, kind of what they're taking in per day, stuff like that. And I'm sure Gordy can relate to this. Like most of the time, clients don't eat a lot of protein at all, and it's like way under. And when I tell them like, hey, you should do this or get this, and their mind is like exploding. They're like, what? That much? Like, no way. But if you look it up, if you Google this, like how much protein should I get? The RDA or RDI, whatever you want to call it, recommended daily amount or intake is, what is it, Gordy?
Yeah, so I think it's 0.08 or 0.8.
So it's 0.8 kilograms
Grams per
kilogram, which breaks down to 0.36 grams per pound, which is, I mean, like,
so
it's ridiculous. Like, really, it is ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's completely interdependent on who you are, activity, and age. And that's some of the stuff that we can get into, because what's right for a teenager that's full of testosterone is going to be completely different than a 60-year-old lady that's, dealing with sarcopenia. So I think that's super valuable that we get into that. And that's like a minimum standard. And that's what I like people to realize, is we need a certain amount of calories, and a certain percentage of those calories should come from protein. And protein doesn't turn into glucose unless certain situations happen. So it's the building blocks of life. So this should, in my opinion, should be a priority. I think you probably see it the same way.
Yes.
But again, customizing it to your age and ability, or activity, stuff like that, super important. So
for sure. And everything.
What do you do personally?
Well, right now I don't like weigh anything out right now. But I mean, I'm probably anywhere from like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per pound right now.
Yeah.
And I'm maybe even more. I don't really measure, but protein's like the building block of every single one of my meals, like by far. Exactly. I eat it in the morning for my breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, for my snack at night. Like it's always in there. And Gordy, like, you're completely right. It's obviously going to depend on many different factors in regard to like the muscle you have already, the activity level, your age, all these things are going to play into it. But what I think is like a huge misconception is if you just type in how much protein should I have for, like, if you're starting out trying to like figure out what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, and you get that like 0.36 grams per pound, that is like the bare minimum of like survival for basically for your body to like for protein intake. Like protein is so important for your body. You can't live without protein. You can live without carbs, obviously, and fat, but I mean, protein is like Gordy said, it is the building block. So I think people really need to realize how important it is. And when you see clients and the eating habits, it's just like protein is just like an afterthought for a lot of people. And it just putting the protein in front and making it a priority can do like wonders for physically, probably mentally, feel better, more energy, how it goes, all that stuff.
Yeah, so the thermogenic effect. So how much energy does it take to actually burn it? So it actually costs energy to actually assimilate protein. So that's in of itself, that's one of the things that you can factor in when you consume protein. It actually takes more energy to break that down and utilize it. So when you make that a priority, like you said, this is a great thing, because now we can actually burn energy. We're just trying to burn this protein, and like I said, be able to utilize it. But again, I think it's really important to realize protein as a whole, like what it's going to do for you beneficial wise. And there's a lot of different things that we could get into. I don't want to drag this on forever. But with protein, man, there's just so many important factors. But sticking to the basics, I actually do 1.5,
Okay.
1.5 grams. So for me, it's going to be end up being I'm 215 pounds, so I'm actually getting about.
Just joking.
I know I'm going to be like 205 here in a couple months. But yeah, so I'm like 160 grams is kind of like my minimum, but I'm 40, 41, 42. I don't even know anymore. Years old. And as you age, and this usually blows people's minds, as you age, your protein needs go up. So this is really important to realize is as you do age, and we have like constant, I mean, proteins usually in most people's diet, you actually have this something that's called anabolic resistance as you age. And like anything like insulin, leptin, ghrelin, all these different things, you can become resistant, and we tend to, become resistant to these things. So as you age, that number actually has to increase. So that's something that most people didn't know. And the other time that actually the needs go up dramatically is if you've had an injury. So if you're in the hospital with a trauma, needs go up considered sometimes double. So depending on how bad that trauma is. So I think something that's very simple for people to understand is like 1 gram is pretty easy to do the math. And that's like an absolute minimum. Mm-hmm. And again, I think just to try to make it quick is to realize if you're not exercising, that's different. If you're not breaking down tissue and having a need to repair, then your needs are going to be lower. And that's where we could get into this whole issue about vegetarian diets and how that's low protein. And maybe that's fitting for someone that isn't exercising, mm-hmm. but trying to get enough protein, and the value, the quality of protein does matter. Someone that's going to be exercising a lot, maybe that's not the perfect diet for them. And again, we can get into this stuff in different conversations, but as you age, and so someone that's 18, 17, 16, that age, teenage, their needs are actually on the low end because they have this hormonal cascade going on in the background that supports all this protein synthesis. So their needs are actually much lower. So like 30 grams per day or per meal, 4 to 5 meals for an athlete. And someone that's not an athlete would probably be 3 meals minimum, and that's 90 grams per day. That's pretty damn low. So
that's really low. But like you said, I mean, they're flooded. At least males are flooded with testosterone. The building blocks.
But think about this just for a second. So if you 30 grams. Most people, and 30 grams is going to be a minimum for females as well. Think about a chicken breast. That's going to be, 6 ounces, 8 ounces is going to be what, 40 some grams of protein?
It's like 7. I think it's like in a range from 7 to 9 grams per ounce of chicken.
So let's say about 40 grams of protein for a decent sized chicken breast.
Yeah.
Now that I just like to relate things, same with red meat, is that size of it. If that's about 40 grams, do you as a person, and this is what I want people listening to think about, do you eat that size, like 30 to 40 grams or a 6 to 8 ounce piece of something, protein, 4 times a day, 3 to 4 times a day? And most people are going to say no.
No, absolutely.
No. And that's a minimum.
Yeah.
So that's the part that's shocking. Is that
right. And
protein.
I'm trying to think here, but I mean, like 40 grams, I think like, that 0.36 that they're talking to you about, like per pound. I mean, it's just your daily intake would be like 1.5 chicken breasts. You know what I mean? Like something ridiculous.
So if you're not active at all, maybe that's closer, but it's still not even close. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe, right.
Yeah. And I mean, like you were alluding to, when you're younger, you don't need so much. I mean, if you're an athlete and you're younger, your carb intake should be like higher than your protein. You're active, you're burning a ton of fuel. Like, yeah. You don't need as much protein, just like Gordy said. Your testosterone, all these hormonal things are just like super high. You don't have to worry about anything like that. But as you age, like you said, your body is getting less and less and less efficient at actually processing and breaking down the protein and using that protein well. So you have to eat a ton more because it's just inefficient at it. So you have to like almost overeat protein so your body can get enough of it to really provide you with what it needs. And obviously it's the essential building block of muscle, in order to, and that's what, when you're talking about like 50s, 60s, 70s, like, oh my God, strength training and like protein, it is so important to just be able to function, like sit up and down, get upstairs, like do things like that comfortably, like carry your groceries in. I'm sure everyone wants to do that, but like if you're not strength training, if you're not getting enough protein, I mean, it's going to be hard for your body to really take on that demand like day in and day out, for sure, 100%.
Yeah, that's why I say, maybe to end this part of it is to make it simple, because that's kind of what ultimately we want to do is like, if you're someone that's not exercising, this is just what I tell people, and you can tell me what you think as well. But I'll say 30 grams per meal and 3 times a day is kind of a minimum standard. If you can get 4, that's great. But that's an easy recommendation to, one, track to see if you are getting even close to that. And if not, then you can see, this is somewhere that you can improve your diet because of that one demand for the amino acids within this protein. And that's going to help with literally everything in your life and recovery and your organs functioning and all these things that need these amino acids. And if you see that you were only at half of that and you were struggling, well, this might be the case. So tracking it is beautiful for that reason, because you have data to actually look back on and make adjustments based on that data. So I love that part of it. But just having a baseline at 30 grams per meal, 3 times a day, is a good starting point. And if you're exercising, you can make that 4 to 5. If you're very, very active, definitely 5. And one of the misconceptions is eating it before bed too. That's something we could talk about. And it is actually, if you're an athlete, especially a young athlete, is getting that, let's say, 5th meal is actually really, really important to staying anabolic, which.
Yeah. And that's something, we can definitely get into more, another topic. But I mean, I think that, like he said, I think Gordy's baseline numbers were awesome. I completely agree with it. I think just looking back on this conversation and taking, what can you take away from this conversation, is that protein is important. Like, I think that's like the main thing. And you should be eating probably more than you think, like a lot more than you think. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, you don't have to answer it right this second, but macro wise, like percentage wise, a lot of people do macros nowadays. Like, do you have a recommendation for what you generally tell people?
Yeah, so my recommendations for most of my clients just starting out is 40, 30, 30. So I do 40% protein, 30 carb, 30 fat. To me, that's a super balanced diet. Obviously a little bit higher in protein, but it is something good to shoot for, I think, and just getting used to eating like more protein, making it the main focus of your every meal. What are your like recommendations for macros?
Yeah, so depending on what their overall.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like more, what is your current situation? What have you been doing? What have you been doing right? What have you been doing wrong? And then kind of dissecting, likely where were you? And let's build up to get you to that point. But with that being said, 40, 30, 30 is something that I love. So protein wise, especially, the fat and carbs are completely dependent on their current situation and where they want to go. So
exactly.
But we're not really talking about that. So yes, your protein, I love that.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah, you can mess with the carbs, you can mess with the fat, depending upon if you're a runner, or you're trying to get chiseled for the summer, whatever. I don't know. Like, obviously, you're going to bounce those numbers around a little bit. But yeah, in general, 40, 30, 30 is what I really fall back on most of the time. And I think it's a great starting point for everyone.
Yeah.
And I would say, just to take away from this, I think the whole 1 gram per pound, I guess, is a good starting point for most people. That's obviously for us, and what we're talking about, this is probably on the low end, but just like Gordy said, like building up to the point where you can eat a little bit more and kind of understand like how much you should be eating each meal and like how much you should be eating each day. Baby steps, you know what I mean? Like, you're not just going to switch overnight and change your whole like eating habits or meal plan, but
for sure. And that's kind of, maybe we can just segue with that, is like, as far as protein topics, this is one that always pops in my head, and that's timing of protein. Like, when is it appropriate? You know, again, if you're exercising, it's often very different than if you're someone that's not exercising. But there's a lot of misconceptions with, let's say, the anabolic window. You've heard that a million times, like,
yeah.
Absolutely. And this is where I've seen a lot of data or a lot of information that's just, it's just not true, and it doesn't really make sense. And part of that I wanted to get into was, as far as, so exercise itself is a stimulant towards protein synthesis, so being anabolic. And then after you exercise, it actually makes you anabolic for 24 to 48 hours. So when people say, well, days that I work out, I actually eat more and more protein. But actually, in fact, what's the truth is, because that exercise creates that anabolic response, something called mTOR, your needs for protein that day are actually slightly less than the next day. Let's say you don't exercise. So something that stimulates that same thing, mTOR, this metabolic pathway, is the other thing that can stimulate it the same exact way, just through a different response, is protein. So if you consume, and there's a certain point of protein amount-wise, that if you reach this point, it triggers protein synthesis. So exercise itself triggers it, and then nutrition. So after you eat, it's important to get plenty of protein, and you want to actually space these out. So as you go through the day, you don't want to be snacking on protein. And this part gets a little bit technical. I don't want to get too much into it because it'll just drag on forever. But there's an amino acid within protein called leucine. I know you know what leucine is. It's one of the branch chain amino acids. And there's actually a trigger point that you have to build up to trigger that protein synthesis through mTOR. And that, for, let's say, females, is 30 grams. It's kind of what they think. But that's where quality actually matters too. So like, pea protein is very low in leucine, but whey is very high in leucine. So to get to that trigger point, that minimum kind of standard to kick off protein synthesis, it's really highly dependent on leucine. And that just kind of goes back to the need for getting good protein, but also the amount of protein. In guys, it's going to be more like 40 to 50%. And ultimately, what I was trying to get to is, like, if you exercise or you don't exercise the day after, you can still increase protein synthesis by eating large amounts of protein, essentially. And it has the same exact response. It's an anabolic response, which is crazy. That's cool. And part of it's like a self-defense mechanism for like anti-sarcopenia. When you get older, you can actually eat enough protein and save muscle mass without even exercising. It'll stimulate that growth, which is or maintenance of muscle tissue. So I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but
yeah, totally fine.
it matters when you eat it. So the next day after exercise is actually more important to recovery than the day of, because you already had that protein synthesis, that stimulus. So
no, that's super interesting. I was just laughing in the beginning because I just picture, at the gyms, like those dudes like shaking those whey bottles after their workout.
I got 60 minutes.
I got 60 minutes, bro.
So,
and I know, I mean, a lot of people ask me about that. Like, I gotta eat. I'm like, no, like, don't, like, you're fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like, eat, like, have a meal. Like, that's the best thing you could do is like have a meal. If you're hungry, like after, to me, it's more important to like get some carbs in to like replenish the glucose after a workout. But I mean, yeah, you don't have like a time, like the clock isn't ticking down. Like you don't have to sprint towards anything to get.
Yeah, because afterwards you have that anabolic response. You're kind of protected in some ways.
Yeah.
But soon thereafter, you can trigger that same response with that leucine trigger with another meal. So the goal throughout the day is to not eat small amounts of protein. You actually eat what they call bolus amounts, which is large amounts. So if each meal has 30 to 40 to 50, depending on your age, activity level, that stuff, and you re-trigger that protein synthesis instead of not reaching that level and just having little bumps from the protein, the amino acids themselves. And one of the cool parts is you can actually just add leucine to like inferior protein, let's say pea protein. You can add just leucine and make it seem as though it's a more high quality, higher leucine content, like red meat would be. They naturally have a lot of leucine in it. So if you are a vegetarian and this is something that's important to you, it's really important to add in 2.5 grams of leucine to get that anabolic protein synthesis through mTOR response. But you don't want to graze, and that's where people are going wrong, is they're just eating a little. All you're doing is triggering insulin rather than eating big amounts and then having, it's like fasting and feasting, which is so important overall. That's a whole nother topic in itself, but you want to be fasting in these middle periods between your big meals and not have little insulin spikes all over the place. So yeah, like just eat meals throughout the day that are bigger and not snack.
Yeah. And I mean, that's an actual topic we'll probably get into, like the the whole talking about, well, you should be having 19 meals throughout the day instead of, you know what I mean? Like, gonna keep your metabolism spike it's gonna raise your metabolism the more meals you eat per day and stuff like that. That's a whole nother topic we will actually get into. But I think before we end this, Gordy did touch on some things that I did want to hit just really quick, and that's vegetarian and veganism, and in regard to protein. Obviously, when you take on that kind of lifestyle, which is completely fine, your choice, 100%. But you are going to have trouble finding really good high sources of protein unless you're supplementing. And that's a huge thing when you are doing a vegan or vegetarian diet, is that you have to be smart about it. And it's not just, I'm just going to eat a bunch of veggies and I'll be fine, especially when you're exercising, because you really have to like do some research on this and like break down like what supplements what you need to supplement your foods with, because you're not going to be getting certain things that are super important, because amino acids are so important and they are just so abundant in meats, animal meats, and you obviously are not you're not getting that. So if you're going to go that route, just make sure that you do your research, I would say. I mean, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And people, the body's pretty amazing at just keeping itself alive. And a lot of times, and I don't want it to sound like I'm bashing a vegetarian lifestyle or vegan lifestyle, um, but it is pretty limiting in that really specific way, you know, low leucine levels, low protein in general. Um, I actually, people are surprised with some of my thoughts regarding this, and that it comes down to, I think in life, it's really important to not over consume anything. And I think there's periods where you should actually have very low levels of protein. And there's talk about mTOR, the thing that drives protein synthesis and can be so valuable for protecting muscle, that it also can have that reverse effect if you overconsume. So I think that it's really important that people take periods of their life and actually lower their protein substantially to not over drive this mTOR pathway. And then, I mean, there's some connection to cancer, but I don't really believe that part of it. But that anabolic resistance, I think you could fight that off by having periods of your life where you're doing more fasting, and you're bringing down the protein temporarily, not long term. But that's where I think everyone should, in some way, do more of a vegetarian lifestyle, more for that low protein concept. And that's cool that, you know, it's a tool in your tool belt. And I think that all these different ways of eating or not eating with fasting are really valuable in that way, because they all can have a positive effect when actually done at the right time, the right place for the right person. So yeah, I mean, that's another topic. And this is something that people can watch this video and then have questions. And that's what I love about this, is that we can bring up certain topics that are valuable, but it can also spin off other questions and we can just answer them, you know, whatever media we're posting this on. So
100%. But I mean, I guess, so like for my vegetarian clients or vegan clients, I always make sure that so a simple way for me is, or a simple, I'm just like, hey, make sure you take some BCAAs or something that has at least like some leucine in it. That'll help you guys. If not, get like leucine powder, like, and actually put it in, you know what I mean? Like your protein shakes or whatever, like whatever you want to do. But just having that, I mean, the lack of leucine in like veggies, I mean, soy has a decent amount, but not even close to the amount of,
it's still low, yeah.
It's still pretty low. Pea, like all the vegetables, I mean, they're just so low comparative to animal proteins. And I don't know if people took away how important leucine is in regard to like protein synthesis, muscle building, and like what your body needs to actually grow and keep that muscle. Because it's the most, I mean, it's the most important amino in regard to like muscle growth and keeping that muscle. And
yeah, and part of this should really, when we talk about protein, we should be talking about muscle. And muscle, they call it the organ of longevity. And I always think that's really interesting, because it truly is. Like, if you lose your muscle over time, you can't really handle glucose because it stores it within that muscle. And if you lose that storage potential, anytime that you're consuming glucose, it doesn't have anywhere to go. And then it just ends up driving your blood sugar up and causing insulin resistance, that's a topic we got to cover, because that's the worst of all of them.
We got 20 topics in this conversation, so that's good.
Yeah, lots of good content. But someone that is unhealthy currently, the most advantageous, the thing that you can do to reverse your health the quickest is to add muscle. And to add muscle, you're going to need that support of that protein.
It's true. I mean, I'm 60 years old and I look pretty good. So, and it's just due to working out. Yeah.
Did you say 60?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, nice. My hairline, that makes me look 60.
Me too, but it's all good.
My favorite.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is cool because we got like a bunch of different topics that we can really dive into at a different time. And obviously, like you said, people can like leave questions or whatever you want in the bottom wherever if we actually post this, wherever we post this.
Yes.
I'm joking. I just meant wherever. Um, but yeah, I think that was actually kind of cool. Like, I mean, if you have anything else to add, go nuts. But I think we touched on most of the stuff that we really wanted to get into. So
Yeah, I think we can just continue the conversation with more specific questions that people ask. It's kind of a glance over things. It's difficult because, like, for me, it's like there's so many great, amazing things about protein and building muscle and, protecting your health long term. And that's one of the things that, we get into with older people. And that's something we can talk about it in comments. But the older you get, the more important muscle is. And most people actually, loss of life when you get really old is usually because of a fall or the result of that fall, not being able to recover. And then slowly after these injuries, you just end up kind of a progression towards, death, which is unfortunate. But it's all related to sarcopenia and loss of stability and strength and loss of the ability to exercise. And it's all correlated. So keeping your muscle mass now and doing it the right way by supporting it is the most important thing you can do. And it is the organ of longevity. So,
and just for people, if you don't know what sarcopenia is, it just basically means the loss of muscle.
Yeah.
Like losing muscle. And everyone knows everyone's getting older. It doesn't matter how old you are, you're getting older every single day. And it's really never too late to start switching up your foods, start strength training, even getting out there and doing some cardio. It's not great for muscle growth, but it's definitely good for cardiovascular health. So you can never start too late unless you're dead, I guess.
Amen, sister.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yep. So if you got anything out of this, exercise, get your protein.
Get your protein on. Get your protein on.
The only people that are going to have issues with protein are if you have a very, very specific and very rare disease. If you literally have lost your kidney, otherwise that is a complete misnomer. It is false. It is not bad for your kidney.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go. You hit that. Never mind. That's what I was going to say. Don't worry about destroying your kidney.
I know. I just saw a comment. I saw a comment on Facebook today talking about this guy getting a certain amount of protein, and this person chimes in and like, oh my God, you're gonna literally explode your kidney. I'm like, oh boy. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I remember we had so many fights over that at our last place I worked about. It was just so stupid.
Yep. So
So even just to let everyone else know, even fitness people or professionals, some of them still don't know what they're talking about. And I mean, I probably don't have the time either, but
don't say that.
I'm just saying, like, this stuff I know, but some people, some people still don't even know, like,
oh, you're one smart cookie.
Some very basic things.
Yeah. So yeah, good first chat, man. It's good to see your face.
You too.
And then we'll have some more conversations about some really cool in-depth or simple things, and just keep the information rolling, man. I like it. I want to.
Sure. Yeah. If anyone leaves a comment and they want something for us to discuss, maybe we'll hit that topic too. Whatever, doesn't matter. But we got a lot in store.
Cool.
That's for sure.
I like it.
Good show.
All right. Good talk.
Good talk, man.
Peace.